Have you ever found yourself curious about the question, what would make a man most tragic? It's a heavy question, but the answer is rarely found in the grand, dramatic downfalls we see in movies. Instead, it's found in the silence. Carl Jung once stated, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This fate, for many, isn't a sudden shipwreck. It's a slow, imperceptible leak. It's a collection of habits that happen inside of you every single day that you don't even notice. Not because they are too subtle, but because they have become too familiar. They are the quiet compromises, the deferred dreams, the silent surrenders. They don't steal your sleep away in one night, but slowly, quietly, they begin to eat away at your essence, not through physical indulgence, but through mental compromise. In today's world, we often focus on external demons. We fear the influence of pornography, the drain of social media, or the poison of addiction. And rightly so. These can corrupt the mind and distort reality. But there are things far more dangerous, because they are more intimate, more silent in their action, and deeper in their reach. These are the internal habits that steal your belief in yourself, that blur the image of the person you are striving to become. They don't make headlines. They aren't the subject of popular self-development challenges, because they aren't glamorous enough to discuss. And that is precisely why they are so perilous. Jung believed that when a man ceases to believe in the light of his own future, he begins to be devoured by the shadow of his own past. And the most dangerous shadow isn't the fear of failure, but the creeping belief that there is nothing left worth striving for. This cynicism, the one we gradually adopt over time, doesn't come from wisdom. It comes from unhealed wounds, from disappointments, from all the moments we broke a promise to ourselves. Think about it. Every time you set a goal and then abandoned it, every time you promised to change and then reverted to old patterns, you didn't just lose time. You sent a quiet signal to your subconscious. My words are not reliable. You created a tiny fracture in your self-trust. A single fracture is nothing, but hundreds, thousands over the years, they shatter the foundation of your self-belief. You stop trusting that you are capable of change. This lack of faith becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You begin to procrastinate on simple actions because, deep down, you've learned not to trust your own follow-through. What's the point in starting if you've already predicted the ending? This internal state soon colors your external world. You feel uncomfortable around disciplined people. Their quiet dedication doesn't inspire you. It silently accuses you. Their action acts as a mirror, reflecting your own complacency, and so you look away. Unconsciously, you start seeking out people who share your weariness, not for mutual support, but for a mutual excuse. You gravitate towards the choir of the resigned. These relationships, comfortable in their shared stagnation, become the very walls of your prison. Jung called this phenomenon a psychological contagion, or a collective infection by the shadow. It's a state where the individual, to avoid the pain of his own shortcomings, dissolves his will into the unconscious current of the group. The group's motto becomes, "It's not our fault." And in that shared absolution, individual responsibility dies. But perhaps the most terrifying part is not that you give up, but that you maintain the appearance of trying. You make plans, you read books, you listen to podcasts, you fantasize about success. You build an elaborate facade of intention. In psychology, this relates to the concept of the persona, the mask we present to the world. Your persona is that of a striver, an aspirer, a planner. But behind the mask, the real self remains inert. This is where the myth of good intentions becomes a sophisticated escape mechanism. You believe that because you can envision a goal, you are already close to it. This visualization gives you a small hit of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, creating the illusion of progress while real action remains absent. Jung called this an identification with the ideal image. It's a state where a person feels valuable simply because they think about noble things. But in analytical psychology, this doesn't lead to individuation, the process of becoming your authentic, whole self. It leads to a dangerous delusion. You start living more in your head than in the real world. When someone asks what you're doing with your life, you reply with conviction, "I have plans." When you fail to act, you console yourself, "I had good intentions." But, as Jung emphatically stressed, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The problem isn't your intentions, it's your unwillingness to look at the darkness of your inaction, to confront the real reasons you avoid taking that first, clumsy step. If this idea of uncovering the hidden stories we tell ourselves is already sparking a new perspective for you, take a moment to subscribe to Mind Decode Explained. We journey through these intricate landscapes of the mind together every single week. Paradoxically, when a man loses faith in himself, his circle of friends often becomes a circle of mirrors, each reflecting the same resignation. These conversations, cloaked in the language of commiseration, are not healing, they are reinforcing. They are a collective justification for stagnation. Life is hard, one says. The system is rigged, says another. Only the lucky ones make it, they all agree. Each statement is a brick in the wall of their shared prison. Within this collective, doubt is no longer a temporary feeling. It becomes a permanent worldview. You no longer think of yourself as a person who feels disappointed. You believe the world is a grand disappointment. You no longer think you alone procrastinate. You believe that meaningful action itself is a form of foolishness. And so, without realizing it, you forge for yourself an invisible suit of armor made of cynicism. When a friend announces a new venture, you might say, "Good luck," but your internal monologue is, "They'll see what reality is like soon enough." This armor feels like wisdom, but it's not. As Jung would argue, it is an unresolved moral problem. It's a hollow shell built on unprocessed pain. It's not a lesson learned. It's a defense mechanism, a wall that allows no new, hopeful ideas to penetrate. But what is this reality you speak of? Is it objective truth, or is it simply the reality you have accepted because you are too tired, too wounded, to fight for a different one? The greatest tragedy is to mistake the limits of your courage for the limits of the world. To break free, Jung taught, you must begin the process of individuation, which means you must differentiate yourself from the collective unconscious. This doesn't mean rejecting the world or becoming a hermit. It means waking up while others in your immediate circle are asleep. It means tending to the small flame of your own will even when the winds of collective doubt howl around you. This is incredibly difficult because the human need for belonging is primal. If the price of belonging to your group is the quiet abandonment of your dreams, many will pay it without a second thought. They will talk less about what they truly desire and more about why those desires are naive. They become masters of risk analysis but are paralyzed children when it comes to taking the simplest of actions. Why? Because they have learned to equate failure with shame. Brené Brown's research distinguishes these two perfectly. Guilt is, "I did something bad," while shame is, "I am bad." The procrastinator isn't just afraid of his project failing. He's afraid the failure will be proof of his own inherent inadequacy. So he chooses the quiet pain of inaction over the potential public agony of shame. But Jung would be clear, it is this repeated passivity that is the real failure, the failure of the soul to manifest. At that point, the shadow, the dark, unlived side of the personalities, no longer a part of you to be integrated. It begins to rule you completely. Let's bring this to life with the story of Adrian, a man who dreamed of being a writer. For years, his persona was that of the writer. He bought the right books, he talked about narrative structure, he had outlines for 3 novels. But he never finished a single chapter. Why? Underneath his intellectual preparations was a deep, gnawing belief. He didn't feel he deserved to be a writer. Every time he sat down to write, his inner critic, his shadow, would whisper, "Who are you to think you have something to say? No one will read this, and if they do, they'll hate it. Then your only dream, the one thing that makes you feel special, will be gone. You will be exposed as a fraud." And so, The unfulfilled dream became Adrian's most precious possession and his ultimate prison. As long as he didn't try, he couldn't fail. As long as he was preparing, he could maintain the fantasy of being a brilliant, undiscovered author. The fantasy was safer than the reality. This is the most sophisticated escape of all, not escaping failure, but escaping the potential loss of the dream itself. Jung wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality." Adrian's inaction was not laziness, it was a deeply moral, albeit misguided, attempt to protect his ego from what he perceived as the fatal wound of shame. His paralysis was his fate, a fate directed by his unconscious, unacknowledged shadow. This cycle creates a downward spiral of self-worth. Every postponed action is another broken promise, another piece of evidence for the inner critic. See? It whispers, "I told you, you can't be trusted." When you live in this loop long enough, you no longer say, "I've been putting off writing." You say, "I am undisciplined." You no longer say, "I'm afraid of being judged." You say, "I'm just not a writer." The behavior has become your identity. And when something is your identity, any attempt to change it feels like you are trying to amputate a part of yourself. This is what Jung called an identification with the shadow. The tragic moment you can no longer see the difference between who you truly are and the fears that have come to define you. The path out is not a grand, heroic leap. It's a small, almost pathetic act of rebellion against your own internal narrative. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need a surge of motivation. You don't need to feel ready, because you never will be. Liberation comes the moment you accept you will never be fully ready, and you move forward anyway. For Adrian, it wasn't finishing the book. It was writing one honest, terrible sentence, just one. That single sentence is a revolutionary act. It provides the subconscious with a new, contradictory piece of evidence. It says, "Maybe the old story isn't true. I acted, even though I was afraid." This is how you rebuild self-trust. Not with affirmations, but with actions. Small, concrete, repeatable actions. Waking up on time for 3 days in a row. Writing for 5 minutes, even if it's nonsense. Saying no to one conversation that you know is just a justification for stagnation. These things are small, yes, but as Jung taught, the soul's journey is often found in the small things. These details rebuild the sacred relationship with yourself, the one that was fractured by 1,000 broken promises. This becomes the foundation for all real change. The process of individuation requires moving beyond the persona you've carefully constructed the image based on past failures and future fears. It means you cannot wait for inspiration to strike. You must act your way into a new way of feeling. You must embrace the discomfort of being a beginner, of being imperfect, of potentially being judged. Because it is only in this messy, vulnerable confrontation with reality that a new, more authentic self is born. The ego seeks safety and comfort, but as Jung noted, the soul seeks growth and wholeness, and these two paths rarely align. So the final choice is this. Do you want to continue living as a carefully protected persona, a version of yourself that avoids all discomfort? Or do you want to become an individual, a real person who can be hurt, but because of it, can truly grow? Stop deceiving yourself with one more plan, one more book, one more podcast. Stop seeking the false empathy of those who are trapped in the same delusion. Start with the smallest possible action. And do not judge it by its outcome or its quality. Judge it only by the flicker of courage it awakens within you. Every time you do this, you are taking back the pen. You are rewriting your own story. And eventually, you will no longer need to imagine a stronger version of yourself, because you will be too busy living it. Not through perfection, but through honest, repeated, courageous action. This is the path. No one else can walk it for you, but no one can take it away from you once you have begun.